Are you talking on behalf of the women and the lesbos now? Because let me have a moment, please.
No, it shouldn't be called the cost of living. It should actually be called the cost of surviving.
Taking the tax off fresh fruit and vegetables mean that everyone has a bit of an easier time in the checkout. But it's not just that. That's a package of a cost of living support which gets in and helps people who are feeling the most economic pain at the moment. That includes young people. Policies like free dental care mean that young people won't have to put off their essential health care until they can afford it, and they'll get it done now.
We need to afford our groceries. I don't know what these people have as their pay slip, but I know that I'm in the same category. I just want to afford my groceries. Taking 15% GST off all food so that we can afford our kai. No one should go hungry in Aotearoa. And even a step further in that, actually looking at our kai sovereignty policy, which is actually breaking down the duopoly of supermarkets, because they have, at the end of the day, when you take 15% GST off food, supermarkets still have that control over upping the prices. So we're actually going further.
Wealthy people would disproportionately benefit the most from this policy, but we also know, looking overseas, that this in fact does nothing to see supermarkets filling the gap, as Hannah just alluded to. So what the Greens have said is that we also know that while everyday New Zealanders are struggling to put food on the table, supermarkets are currently making excess profits of $1 million a day. We have to fix the fundamentals of our tax system, and if we do that, we can ensure that everybody has enough money in their back pocket with an income guarantee of at least $385 per week.
Everyone in our tax package will get some relief, and that is meaningful to all people.
Are your policies just focused on middle and older generations?
I don't think so at all. I mean, $20 a fortnight for someone on the minimum wage is actually not to be sniffed at. We want to encourage those young people to have that, get that promotion, to work more hours if they want to.
For the young people who are watching and who have a minimum wage job at a supermarket or, at a local shop, and you're offering them $10 more a week, so 1.5 cabbages more a week, and you're saying that what they should do is just get a better job.
It's better than a few cents off your carrots, which is what Labor are offering you. We actually don't think that will be passed on at all. In fact, all of the evidence shows it will not be passed on.
The Greens want to limit the amount that landlords can put up rent each year. Why isn't that a good idea?
We know that we have a housing crisis. We don't have enough homes for the number of people who want a home to live in. The last thing that we want to do is limit supply by making it harder for people to be a landlord. If you look at the interest deductibility limitations that Labor introduced a few years ago, that means an average tax extra of $6,000 this year. If that flows on to a person who's renting, that's $120 per week extra. A lot of landlords can't afford that extra tax, so might just, sell up.
A house.
And then all of a sudden, we don't actually have more homes, but we've got more homes for people who might be a first-home buyer, but that doesn't help someone who's renting.
You're talking a lot about landlords, though. Are you guys more on the side of landlords than renters?
Yep.
We're on the side of renters because we know that if landlords have more costs imposed on them, that becomes more expensive for someone who's renting.
You can't just build houses when the cost of building a house is super high, because you're not going to build that many houses for your money, right?
What are you going to do?
So what we are going to do is we're going to look at prefab housing, right? Much cheaper homes. We're also going to look at one of the other causes a lot of people haven't thought about is immigration. You can't bring in 100,000 people and expect that everyone's going to have a place to live. This is huge pressure, and some of the parties here want now their relatives to come on board as well. It's called chain migration. So we're opposed to that. We want to make sure New Zealanders are at the front of the queue.
You want people's families to not come to New Zealand?
No, we do, but we want to limit it. No, we do, but we want to limit it. We've already got a policy for that.
All right, National, you want to let renters dip into their KiwiSaver in order to help pay for their flat bond.
What the problem is we're trying to solve is it's really expensive to get into your first flat. We've recognised that and said, actually, if you're going to be responsible with your flat, then you should be able to use part of your KiwiSaver, a small part, to pay for your bond, which you can then put back into your KiwiSaver when it's finished. It's just a smart thing to do that I think most people will be pretty happy with using.
I'm just mind blown how you could look at the housing crisis or the state of rents in this country and decide that the most important thing to do is to allow people to dip into their retirement savings to bid up the cost of bonds in this country. Ultimately, what we're looking at here is a tax system, an economy, which incentivises investment into land speculation. Yep. So to get to the green solutions, what the Greens have been proposing are rent controls, as you you alluded to before. I would love to get into that because what the international evidence shows is that where rent controls have been implemented, rents have been controlled.
We've inherited a housing crisis that has been decades in the making, and Labor is building our way out of it. Can we do more for renters? Yes. That's why Labor has introduced the Healthy Homes Standards, which protect renters, where National is proposing to bring back no-cause evictions and to see renters kicked out by their landlords more easily. That's not the kind of renting future that I want for Aotearoa, but it's also not what I want for first home buyers. We want to make sure that a left-wing government protects first home buyers in the market and that we see more first homes going to people who need them in Aotearoa.
The reality is for rangatahi Māori who look like me, they can't even get their foot in the door because I've got a Māori last name. That's the racism that's within this housing market. There is actually enough supply to go around in Aotearoa. There's 94,000 unoccupied homes in Aotearoa currently right now, and there's 100,000 homeless people. So that's why we're implementing a ghost house tax, so that we know that's one way that we can get whānau into housing through that tax relief. Also having a cap on our renters, because an average price is looking at $550 for rangatahi Māori is just unacceptable. It's unrealistic to survive. It shouldn't be called the cost of living. It should actually be called the cost of surviving.
Lee, your party leader, Winston Peters, wants a new law banning anyone from accessing a public bathroom or changing room designed for the opposite sex use. Where is your evidence?
There's studies all over. We have people basically saying to us, hey, I was assaulted in a bathroom by a biological male. This is wrong. And, you know, you have biological men getting changed in women's spaces, and it's scaring women.
So you have anecdotal evidence, but you don't have...
I don't have the statistics in front of you right now, but it's a true thing. It's a real thing. We're not on another planet. There are a lot of people concerned with this, not just in New Zealand, all over the world. And we want to stand up for women. We want to stand up for women's spaces. We want to make sure everyone's safe.
With your bathroom policy, particularly at schools, how are you going to enforce it? Are you going to get teachers to, do genital checks at the door, or...?
What a stupid question. No, I think...
Then how?
That's ridiculous. And, you know, making a mockery out of this and women's spaces is just uncalled for. And the pendulum's gone so far to the radical left, you think this is normal. This is not normal.
What we know full well is that our trans and non-binary and gender minority whānau are disproportionately represented in mental ill health, addiction and suicide statistics.
Yes, and we don't want to encourage.
And mate, it's driven by rhetoric from the likes of your party.
No, it's not.
And I expect...
It's driven by rhetoric by your party, which is encouraging it in young children. That's why we want to remove it from schools.
Okay,
more kids now are transgendering or transitioning than ever before.
And the gays came out the closet only like 40-odd years ago or something? Take a second.
There's actually a lot of lesbians and a lot of gays that are actually against...
Are you talking on behalf of the women and the lesbos now? Because let me have a moment, please.
No.
Speaking on behalf of the woke lesbos, what I do have to say is that ultimately... Well, no, I did.
Yes, you did.
Because yes, exactly, and the rhetoric and the fear-mongering behind the likes of what you and your party are putting forward are harming people in our communities because it is not evidence-based. And ultimately, I think that there is a responsibility for political leaders to turn down the temperature on this and to take responsibility for the consequences of their rhetoric, which are hurting people in our communities.
I am so sorry to our takatapui whānau that have to be used as a political football for gaining voters, for gaining votes. That is absolutely, that's no. In a Māori context, you are actually ira wahine, ira tāne, which is, but at the end of the day, you are ira tangata, you are a human, and you should be treated just like a human should be treated on a marae in our kura, which is the upright respects of human rights.
It's really not a problem. And so I just think that it's just something that's a distraction from the really big issues around the economy and cost of living. No one in any school I've been to in the whole country has said we've got an issue with bathrooms. Not a single one.
Is range anxiety really the biggest thing on people's mind about climate change?
Well, it is when you want to think about being kind to the environment and reducing emissions and buying an electric car. Lots of people don't buy them because of the fact that in areas of New Zealand you can't get from A to B in your electric car. So if you want to encourage people to do the right thing, in this country and reduce their emissions and buy an electric vehicle. You have to incentivise them to do that. And one of the big problems we have around New Zealand, especially outside of Auckland, is that we don't have enough charging networks.
Show of hands, is there a climate emergency? We all agree. Okay.
Half agree.
Oh, half agree. So 5.5.
Yeah.
All right. What's the why? Why half agree? A half
Well,
emergency? A half climate?
I think New Zealand's just sick and tired of the fear-mongering, right? We've had 3 years of it with COVID. We don't want to throw our economy out the window with going green. We want to kind of be that pendulum in the middle, because going green is going to cost a lot of money.
I think we need to spend a lot more time thinking about how we adapt to climate change problems. You know, when I went down to Hawke's Bay very quickly after the tragedy that occurred, what was striking to me was there were areas of Napier that were barely affected because they had invested as a local council into infrastructure that had saved parts of their city. I think that's really important, and that's part of my GST sharing policy.
97% of our wetlands, our Moana Tui Tirapo, was destroyed. And if we hadn't have destroyed our wetlands, we wouldn't have seen such drastic effect onto these rural town communities. Also, I'd like to say that well, some people are looking at Tesla cars. We're focusing on Te Tai Tokerau, Gisborne and Napier, who need actually a road.
The value set that we have to take in responding to this climate emergency outside of those states of emergency, what that looks like meaningfully, if we're to talk about this whole of economy approach, is to address the elephant, the cow in the room, and that means putting a price on our agricultural emissions, because presently that is the only industry that is excluded from the emissions trading scheme.
We need real policies that actually don't push out action on methane for another decade. Having a Zero Carbon Act, we now know that we're on target to meet those carbon budgets, but that they're tight and that we can't afford to get rid of policies like the Clean Car Discount, which are really having an effect on our transport fleet.